Each night the dogs were attended to first. They ate before the drivers ate, and no man sought his sleeping robe. Till he had seen to the feet of the dogs he drove, still their strength went down. Since the beginning of the winter they traveled 1,800 miles, dragging sleds the whole weary distance, and 1,800 miles will tell upon life of the toughest. Buck stood it, keeping his mates up to their work and maintaining discipline. Though he, too, was very tired, Billy cried and whimpered regularly in his sleep each night. Joe was sourer than ever, and Solex was unapproachable, blindside or other. But it was Dave. It was Dave who suffered the most. Something had gone wrong with him. He became more and more morose.
Destruction of massive, like hundreds of millions of people, lakes freezing over, harvests and crops dying forever. Like, no, we're just not going to do that. Yes, we have a nuclear program that I personally don't agree with, but this is coming from Biden. But we would never engage in nuclear war. But of course, that's not the way nuclear war works. You have to always have it on the table. And just so you know, you're packing heat. You know what I'm saying? Like, I might destroy humanity. You never know. And so he's calling on some of that hypocrisy. And I totally, look, I do think that they're different.
And then it being at the top of the damn heap, think about the culture. If the emperor is sitting there acting that stupid, just putting the gun on the table, why wouldn't the rest of the world do the exact same stupid crap?
So I really appreciated him saying that, and I think it's, especially on MSNBC, is like, okay, go off, Daniel. A little bit more I wanted to play.
Let me just finally ask you about this 21-year-old enlisted man, the airman from the National Guard, now being charged under the Espionage Act. What do you make of these latest leaks?
They seem to be relatively random. The fact is that we don't have an official Secrets Act, and the Espionage Act, under which I was the first to be charged.
But it was Dave who suffered most of all. Something had gone wrong with him because he became more morose and irritable. And when camp was pitched at once, made his nest where his driver fed him once out of the harness and down. He did not get on his feet again till harness up time in the morning. So Dave is dying. This is when Dave is going to die. But Dave is going to give one last push. This is about all those dogs in the damn Canada and the snow and shit. And they're going back and forth from Dawson and some other Dodge Creek or some shit. I don't know. But sometimes in the traces, when jerked by a sudden stoppage of the sled or by straining to start it, Dave would cry out in pain. The driver examined Dave but could find nothing. All the drivers became interested in his case. They talked it over at mealtime and over their last pipes before going to bed. And one night they held a consultation. He was brought from the nest to the fire and was pressed and prodded till he cried out many times. Something was wrong inside, but they could locate no broken bones, could not make it out. By the time Cassier Bar was reached, he was so weak that he was fallen repeatedly in the traces. The Scotch half-breed called a halt and took him out of the team, making the next dog Solex.
He's like, I think I can say that without being suspected of being a secret troll for Donald Trump. So everyone deserves a fair trial. And I might personally disagree with whether or not, I think we're going to treat Donald Trump real fair and give him a pass only because the security state and centrists who run our government are too afraid to actually fairly prosecute a former president. Of course, the right will have you believe that's totally not true, but we shall see how it all plays out. But I did like, he said that the leaks, these newest Pentagon leaks seemed random, which I think he's correct on, but and he also called into question sort of the broader, specifically the Espionage Act, and saying, and without saying it, sort of, there was a purpose to the leaks that I was a part of. There was a purpose, to the leaks that Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange were part of. There was a purpose to the leaks of Edward Snowden, right?
Solek's fast to the sled.
There's a purpose to this Jason Texera's leaks, right? Other than, yes, gaining popularity with the Discord channel. So I think he's saying there needs to be other laws so we can actually, so that those aspects, who you are, what you're doing, and why you're doing it, and what the information is, should be relevant in your broader case. I mean, I am actually very curious what will happen to this whistleblower, or this non-whistleblower, this leaker, because it's so seemingly so apolitical, and he's like a right-winger. Because watch, it won't be what was thrown at Reality Winner, right? Watch, it won't be what was thrown, obviously, at Snowden or Assange or Manning or Ellsberg. Like, I'm very curious if there's a double.
Out of the team making the next dog, Solek's fast to the sled. His intention was to rest Dave, letting him run free behind the sled, sick as he was. Just let Dave walk behind the sled. Dave resented being taken out, grunting and growling while the traces were unfastened and whimpering broken-heartedly. When he saw Solek's in the position he had held and served so long, for the pride of trace and trail was his, and sick unto death he could not bear that another dog should do his work. When the sled started, he floundered in the soft snow alongside the beaten trail, attacking Solek's with his teeth, rushing against him and trying to thrust him off into the soft snow on the other side, striving to leap inside his traces and get between him and the sled. And all the while whining and yelping, crying with grief and pain, the half-breed tried to drive him away with the whip, but he paid no heed to the stinging lash. And the man had not the heart to strike harder. Dave refused to run quietly on the trail behind the sled where the going was easy, but continued to flounder alongside in the soft snow where the going was most difficult, till exhausted. Then he fell and lay where he fell, howling lugubriously as the long train of sleds churned by. With the last remnant of his strength, he managed to stagger along behind till the train made another stop, when he floundered past the sleds to his own, where he stood along Solek's. His driver lingered a moment to get a light for his pipe from the man behind. Then he returned and started his dogs. They swung out on the trail with remarkable lack of exertion, turned their heads uneasily, and stopped in surprise. The driver was surprised too. The sled had not moved. He called his comrades to witness the sight. Dave had bitten through both of Solek's traces and was standing directly in front of the sled in his proper place. He pleaded with his eyes to remain there. The driver was perplexed. His comrades talked of how a dog could break its heart through being denied the work that killed it, and recalled instances they had known where dogs too old for the toil or injured had died because they were cut out of the traces. Also, they held it a mercy. Since Dave was to die anyway, then they were going to let him die in the traces. And they held it a mercy, since Dave was to die anyways, that Dave should die in the traces, hard, easy, and content. So Dave was hardest, and again, and proudly he pulled, as of old, though more than once he cried out involuntarily from the bite of his inward hurt. Several times he fell down and was dragged in the traces, and once the sled ran upon him so that he limped thereafter on one of his hind legs. But Dave held out. Dave held out till camp was reached, when his driver made a place for him by the fire. Morning found Dave too weak to travel. At harness up time, Dave tried to crawl to his driver. By compulsive efforts, he got to his feet. By convulsive efforts, Dave got on his feet, staggered and fell. Then Dave wormed his way forward slowly toward where the harnesses were being put on his mates, he would advance his four legs and drag up his body with a sort of hitching movement. When he would advance his four legs and hitch again for a few more inches, his strength had left him, and the last his mates saw of him, he lay gasping in the snow and yearning towards them. But they could hear Dave. But they could hear Dave mournfully howling till they passed out of sight behind a belt of river timber. Here the train was halted. The Scotch half-breed slowly retraced his steps to the camp they had left. The men ceased talk and a revolver shot rang out. The man came back hurriedly. The whip snapped. The bells tinkled merrily. The sleds churned along the trail, but Buck knew, every dog knew, what had taken place behind the belt of river trees. Oh. So Dave had grown institutionalized. The toil might have been hurting his body and was killing him, but God damn it, he was going to die anyways. And what was he going to do? Just die off to the fucking side in the trees? Not with his boys, not with his comrades, not with his brothers, not with his fellow canine warriors. You're going to leave me by the tree to die? I got enough energy. You're going to leave me by the tree to die and you're going to give me a mercy shot? But no, I got enough energy. I got enough energy to do another run. I think I'm dying now. So I'm not going to just run behind. I'm going to run with you guys. Now I'm going to pull the sled. And his old ass fucking body did it. His old ass body made one more trip. And it fell a couple times and it ran over his leg, so he was limping. But God damn it, he said, no, I'm going to keep working. This is what I fucking know. Let's do one last ride for old Dave. One last ride for old Dave was what? Being with the dogs and the dog sleds, 5 other dogs pulling a bunch of load across a bunch of snowy fucking, cold ass fucking. Oof. Dave, you got me on that one. Fucking Jack London. Woo!
Standard here, and that's going to play out. I know this is like the third time we've been talking about it, but I do find it a very interesting story, and I thought he did a good job of sort of threading that needle and focusing more on how we need new laws and protections around actual whistleblowers and not lumping them all under the same sort of, you are helping espionage, you're helping a foreign power, instead of, no, you're trying to inform the American public. That being said, it's still, you're not allowed to share that information, but I think the last thing I'll say, and that he points out, is the overclassification of documents that our government has a habit of doing. And so this is all like, that's all coming out. Like, is too much classified? How much was there a link between some of the leaking that happened under the Trump administration and the massive amount of apparently, American spies, effectively, and CIA agents and operatives who died, who were killed under Trump, right? Of course, we can't talk about that. It's like you're a conspiracy theorist and whatnot. But imagine if that if we actually had a left, if we actually had, truly leftists in power who weren't afraid of asking that question. Great, sir. I'm glad you have a spoiler on your car. Who weren't afraid of asking that question. You know what I'm saying? Like we might interestingly get to the bottom of it. Anyway, that's sort of how I feel about the security state generally, is that I wish we actually had a robust squad. If everyone was Ilhan Omar, that'd be tight. You know what I'm saying? That's all I want to say. That's